Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Level Up Hour on OpenShift.tv. I am Chris Short, Principal Technical Marketing Manager on the OpenShift team. I am also a CNCF ambassador. I was also a sysadmin back in the day. I was also a network admin and all kinds of other fun things. And I'm joined today by Langdon White. Langdon, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I am Langdon White, and this is the Level Up Hour. I'm not sure how much introduction we should do every time, but it's hard to say, but I'm a former developer advocate, engineer, consultant, now technical marketing manager with Red Hat, and I'm here to convince you that containers are awesome and you really want to be using them. So that's what we talk about during this show. I do have to apologize because, my support staff at my house was in the middle of making coffee, and that's why the coffee was delayed our start.
Your staff.
Support staff.
Staff.
Yeah, right. Namely children.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's always nice.
Wait,
so
your kids make your coffee for you?
They do. They're older now, so
Oh.
they make coffee. It's very
Okay.
helpful. That's one of their chores.
I keep forgetting you have older kids like I do. Sorry.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
It's because I'm so young at heart, or
Right,
something.
exactly.
Right.
Something like that.
Yes, exactly. So today, ostensibly, we're going to get to a container type called rhel-tools.
Nice.
But there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about before we get there. So hopefully we'll get there. We'll see. And I'm also concerned. Sorry, I think I forgot to take a Zyrtec this morning.
Oh, well.
So I may have to break for coughing.
Yeah, well, okay. If you got to do that, do that. I can entertain for a little bit.
So we were going to talk a little bit about kind of the way you can kind of get to the rhel-tools thing, and maybe we'll learn some new stuff. I'm always impressed with myself if I teach you something that you haven't seen before. So let's see. Should we go ahead and get started? Is there any other introductions we should get to?
The goal of the show is to help folks, embrace containers and embrace, what they currently know in a new paradigm of a cloud native world, potentially, right? So
right.
They might find themselves in by no doing of their own, potentially. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, and it's also the convenience factor, I think, of containers is very high, which I don't think people necessarily realize. And so, there's all this scary cloud native stuff in a sense, but in fact, many of the things you might want to do are actually easier in kind of a cloud native-y sort of way.
Yeah, it's surprising.
So so I wanted to get started. So let's start here. Let's see if I have the right tab open. Of course I don't. So we're going to start with the container catalog. Red Hat catalog. And is it this guy? Does that look right?
No,
I can never remember which one's called.
Certified container catalog.
Google.
That looks close.
Google was in my way. That's what I'm looking for. So the thing we're going to be talking about today is this thing called rhel-tools. And what I want to point out with rhel-tools, it's actually only available as a rhel 7 version. That doesn't mean it's not interesting, especially if you're managing rhel 7 servers, which we know something like some ridiculous percentage of people are. So it's it probably largely works on a rhel 8 host, but because it's the concept of this is that it's so integrated with the OS itself that it may not. So generally speaking, right, you can run kind of any container on any of the rhels. Generally, some of that scenarios are supported and some aren't, but in general it should just work, right? With this thing, it's a little shakier just because when you because the whole idea of this container image is that it's tightly integrated. And let me back up a little bit for a second. So what we've done in the past couple episodes, right, is we talked about here's how to get a container that is kind of single purpose. I need this tool. It's not installed by default, so I want to go get it, right? And I want to just be able to use it one time or whatever. So like netstat was an example, and then we had a few others. If you want to know the rest of them, go back and watch the show, right? And then we talked a little bit about, okay, now I have a custom piece of software, some little script or whatever that's a helper, like my Blender render, right, that I want to be able to run random places, right? So I want to shove that in a container. So what we're looking at today is, okay, well, wouldn't it be nice, even if it's a little heavyweight, if I had a tool set all in one container that I could use any of the tools in, right? And Red Hat actually publishes a few of these, and over the next couple episodes, we're going to kind of look at all of them. And they all kind of take slightly different approaches. So the first one we're talking about is this one, which is rhel-tools, which was originally developed way back when we used to talk about Atomic Host. And Atomic Host and Core OS, or what we're calling Red Hat Core OS now, are very, very similar. They both use the same technology underneath the RPM OS tree. And the idea is you have an operating system that's immutable except for configuration. So that way you can say, okay, in my data center, I have a golden image of what my web server looks like. I have a golden image of what my database server looks like. I have a golden image of what my OpenShift host looks like. All of these kinds of scenarios are supported by what are called RPM, or what are called OS tree trees. And the RPM part of that is because there are other variants available. So you can actually go and do OS tree with deb, for example. But obviously we care more about the RPM version. So the problem with an OS tree based host is that the scenario of, a lot of times in a data center, you don't want to install anything because it's dangerous and it makes you frightened. But in the case of RCOS, right, or RHCOS or Red Hat Core OS, you can't actually install anything else, or at least not without a huge amount of difficulty. So this toolbox essentially was developed to try to get you some of the tools that you need for troubleshooting and debugging and that kind of stuff to be making it available on an immutable operating system. Nice. So all that said, if you see references, for example, in the documentation, so taking a look at rhel-atomic host, for example, great. And yes, that was its original use case, but that doesn't mean it's not also useful in a regular old rhel 7 or maybe a rhel 8. Like I said, your mileage may vary, because you still don't want to install anything on those if you can avoid it. So the container is really useful as just a set of tools that you might find handy. So that's a bunch of background. And did we have any questions in the chat?
No, I'm kind of just going back and forth with the audience right now. Narendev is in here, like he is usually every week. And,
hello.
We're talking coffee making. Apparently Charles Mahoney's 5-year-old can make coffee now. That's super interesting.
That is well trained.
I mean, I have a 4-year-old here. I don't know if I would trust him with the pour over, right? Like,
right.
But let's.
Well, we have one of the grind and brews, so basically you're just
fill a water push button.
Yeah. So it's a little bit easier.
My technique's a little more complex.
Yeah.
I'm me.
When we drink it, we drink way more volume than we do quality, I would say. Although it's pretty good coffee. It's just we don't go to a lot of effort per cup.
Tim Hortons, baby. That's the best I can do during the coronavirus right now. I'm not trying to go to Costco right now.
Right, exactly. Excuse me. So talking about rhel-tools. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to talk. Okay, so one of the things we've talked about this a little bit in the past is that there's a difficulty in running a container of somebody else's, and that difficulty is how do you run it, right? And so there have been a number of attempts, and I think we talked about some of these attempts. Maybe it was last week. Talking about things like Juju and Charm and Helm and Charts, and even this old thing called Atomic App that I actually worked on. But one of the other things was this Atomic CLI, which was originally developed as kind of like this extra tool that came with every Atomic host. And has kind of since been discontinued. But one of its side effects was this idea of using the labels on container images as a way to give information to future users, right?
Right.
And so I couldn't figure out a great way to make this show nicely. But okay, so let's just kind of start off with.
So this is going to be a meat grinder, is what you're telling me.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Well, so it might have just been me. My, All right.
Whatever.
So if we do a Podman inspect, and I don't know about you, but I always have a mental block. It's inspect, and then info gives you information about how Podman is installed and set up.
Right.
But I have a mental block about which one's which. So I always
they both start with the same two letters. I can't blame you for that at all.
Exactly. So there's lots of useful information in here about the container. But the thing we want to look at in this particular case, and I'll try to expand this so it's a little bit more legible. That's what I mean, is it's hard to make it legible, but is this block called labels. Oh, stupid Tmux. So I always fall for it. Okay, so this block called labels here, which basically has this whole set of different labels. And if you notice,
description.
Exactly. So there's what's the license on it, and I'm going to stop selecting so that it stops jumping.
There you go.
Or I can select this way if I remember. So there's the license on it. Here's the architecture. One of the things that we've been trying to introduce is multi-architecture containers,
Nice.
and they're starting to be a real thing. And so that's also super useful.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly you should never have to worry about this too much, right? It should select the architecture that's appropriate for the platform you're on. But then you have kind of useful for end user information, right? So you have things like the description. And then what I really want to get to, though, is this thing called run. And so what run does is it will actually tell you how to run this container to get it to operate in the way that you want it to. Does that?
This is just a label called run.
Correct. It gets
Awesome.
better than that, but there is just a label. Excuse me. And so you can find out what that, what the recommended way of running this label is. And so if we do,
I mean, that's quite the string. But yeah, let's go ahead and digest it.
Right. So what we can do is we can kind of look at the individual piece by delving in, like extracting this individual label from. Oops. I thought that worked.
What is the -F flag? Do you have to put the -F before inspect?
No, it should.
No.
The -F means the format that you want to give.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I was playing with this and it didn't actually work, but I thought it doesn't like any of them now. I know I've had
template parsing error.
Yeah, it's weird.
Image 1, 2. Oh, is your?
I wonder if these are. Is it like casing or something?
But don't know.
Well, that's annoying. Well, the point being, so normally this works. I don't know why it's not working today for me. Maybe I have a typo somewhere that I'm just not seeing. But that's okay. Regardless, because we're going to look at it differently anyway. So Podman, I think, to kind of avoid the Docker naming namespace, has a lot of, like, in my opinion, kind of slightly pretty complex commands. So there's this container command, and under that there is the run label command, and under that, and then you can give it a flag called display, and then we can see. Oh my God, I am having. And then you need run. Okay, so what this does is kind of in the container stuff, take a look at the run label, then display it, and then you, this is which run label we want, because in theory you can have more than one. But I haven't seen that too often, and I'm not entirely sure of the use case for that. But if you do this, it'll actually not only show you, kind of like we saw before in the label up here.
Nice.
Yeah. So there should be in here. This isn't the greatest example, but in here you can actually have kind of variables. So like name,
there's some in there.
and host. Yeah. And then what this guy does is it actually populates those labels. So see what was name before is now name equals rhel-tools.
Fancy.
So what
I didn't know you could do that.
Hey, see, I told you I'd teach you something.
So this new username followed us yesterday, and it tells you what your problem was. You needed to use single quotes around your string there.
Is that what it was?
But the username is crash loop back off me.
That is pretty hilarious.
That is the best username I think I've seen in quite some time.
It still doesn't like it. I don't know what it is. I know I tried this yesterday. I'm just doing something stupid and I'm not seeing it. All right. But if you take out the display flag, then it will actually run this run command with basically the exact thing you have here. You can also obviously cut and paste it.
Sure.
And of course, is this not going to work for us? What is going on today?
You have to remove. Oh, you got one in use already.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. So, okay. So the idea, which is good in a sense. This guy, the idea of it is it's a container that you kind of keep around and keep adding to, right? So if you've heard if you've ever heard the, which we don't really like, right? The pets versus cattle metaphor. There's a guy called the Steve-O who has a elephants and ants metaphor, which I like better because if you actually ever had cattle, you do actually have a fairly strong relationship with most of your cattle. So the idea being is that this container is one that you treat like a pet, like you keep adding to it, you use it or whatever. Obviously, it's still pretty ephemeral. You can, I just destroyed it relatively easily. So you don't necessarily want to put anything in there that's going to be super dangerous to wander off with. But you, what was I going to say? So, but you can look at, so you can kind of keep adding to it, but that's why it's a named container. And actually, before we start talking about rhel-tools entirely, why don't we just look real quick at how you do the run label?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's and cool. It's really obvious. So you just put in and this is supported by, most of the container runtimes. And so you just put in a label called run. And then you have certain variables, which I'm sure are docked somewhere, that you can use to indicate what you want it to be, what you want it to fill in these guys with, and then, but the big trick here, and as we talked about a little bit when we were talking about how to get like LM sensors to run, this is, where you can give all the different flags that you want to give enough security access to be able to run this container in the way that it's useful. Does that make sense?
So yeah, and the reason why it needs to run as a privileged container is because it's mounting in some pretty important volumes here. So yeah,
exactly, and it's sharing the host network.
Yep, it's doing all the fun things.
There's this is a very quote unquote dangerous container to run. However, if you notice, I am still running it as non-root, so it doesn't have complete privilege.
Yeah,
in theory. So what we do is we do the run on the run label, and that should work better this time. Nice. Obviously, in the future, what I would want to do is, and we can just show that real quick. We can do podman exec. What I love about both Docker and Podman is that you don't have to type the complete ID. Just enough to make it unique, or you can even give it the name, which is probably in this case a better choice. Now it should just drop. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so you got to do bin bash, and then you usually want it.
Yeah, that's not in the right order.
Oh, really?
think so.
I think I might need that. No?
No. IT is right.
I'm having a good technology day.
Podman would not be
Podman
run.
exec?
Well, no, it would be exec. IT bin bash rhel-tools. Yeah, that's what I'm
Maybe
thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, bin bash not found. No container.
Like this is stuff I do all the time, and yet I can't seem to do it.
Can't
on TV.
Remember it. Yeah.
Right.
So I for interactive, T for TTY. Yeah.
Right.
That's good. Okay.
So that should work. Oh, it's because the container's not running. So start.
No, podman run.
Yeah, there's no T. Oh, is it? Do I have to? Oh, yeah, right. No, I just need to run it again. Sorry.
Yeah. E42 or whatever, rhel-tools. Yeah.
Yeah. Will this work though, or is it going to try to start a new one?
I don't think so. No. You got to do your
this is
IT now. Yeah,
it is definitely unhappy with me now.
You've started 3.
Lucky me. 90883. I thought it was. I still think it's Podman start.
Really? Is that right? Podman start.
Yeah, attach.
There you go.
And then I can.
Then you can do rhel-tools. Yeah.
rhel-tools. And then do I need a? I don't think I need a command. There we go. Yeah. So that's how you get back into it. Yeah, that's one of those things that I feel like those two things could be crash, right? Why is there a start and the exec, right? But
yeah. Well, I mean, there is reasons for that in the Docker world, but there is a question from Narendev. What's the difference between running a container as root compared to non-root, since containers just share the kernel? Please explain the difference. This is a very good question.
It depends a lot on what you mean by share the kernel. Yes, they both use the kernel, but like it's the difference between running as a root user in general and running as a non-root user in general. They both share the kernel too,
right?
But they don't have privileges on the kernel,
right?
So lots of the capabilities are blocked, right?
Right. There's certain syscalls that are just not allowed to pass through, right?
Exactly.
When it's not privileged or it's not running as root kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't. What I would need to look into, maybe we can come back to this next time or whatever, is that when you pass the privilege flag, if you need to have a certain privilege to do that, because that does give you a lot more access to syscalls and such.
I think if you have the privilege, like if you have sudo access,
right? That's what I was wondering.
Does it do that?
But it should prompt me for a password because I'm a password.
Right. Yeah. If you're in no password land, then it didn't. So yeah. Right. So clearly it's not invoking.
I think there's a difference between privileged running that container as a root user and privileged running a container as a non-root user.
Absolutely.
But this is a little bit where you kind of have to dig into the details a little bit, and I haven't lately because this is something Podman can do and Docker can't, and not something that comes up for me a whole lot. Basically it's one of those things where I know what I'm trying to accomplish, so I usually pull off the security. I did learn something really interesting about security since our last show, which is, we were talking about :Z. Do you remember?
Yes.
So what I discovered is that, I don't know how many people are aware of the ls-lz command, but this will, if I have any
if you had files in there, you're in your container, that's why.
Yeah, no, it's just because that machine has next to nothing.
Really?
I just made it last night because it's rel 7. So if you notice here, most of these files are labeled user home T. In order to access files with user home T or a bunch of other labels, you need to pass the :Z to get those to turn into a label with container file T. So what happens when you pass that :Z is it relabels it as container file T. So, and that's how you access it from within the container. However, if you notice here, so this is actually a symlink to a NFS mounted directory. Okay, basically what I do is I loop back onto my host machine where the actual files are.
Oh, okay.
To make, so I don't have to install everything into every VM I make, right?
Right.
But
Makes
so
sense.
if I just do,
Right there.
and I think there's going to be a file in here. If you notice, this guy is actually NFST. If I try to use :Z on this file, it will error because it's unable to relabel an NFS file as a container file. However, if I don't use :Z, I can access files that are labeled NFST, or by way of, if anybody else uses it, FuseFST, which is what you get if you use SSHFS as your mounting instead of NFS. So I thought that was super interesting. And you get a very unusual error basically that says you pass the :Z and it tells you, oh, you can't do this because it's mounted, and so I can't relabel. But it turns out that it will actually just work if you just drop the :Z, which never would have occurred to me until I was talking to somebody who actually works on Podman to find out this answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Narinda asked in chat, like how to run a container as root, right? Like, is it actually as simple as
it's
sudo podman? Yeah, that's it, right? Like,
Yep.
don't overthink it. Narinda is basically like,
Right.
don't read too much into it, and don't try. Like, I get it. It's layered, and it could be a little complicated, but sudo podman, sudo docker, that would run the container as root.
Exactly. And the most common reason I want to do that, and this is one of those kind of never-ending, I think, data center problems, whether that data center is your house or a real data center, is I want to run whatever thing, web server. The one I come up with all the time is actually a ZNC server on its standard port.
Okay.
And running it on its standard port is a privileged operation. And the reason I want to run on its standard port is because I'm firewalled and natted and routed and all that stuff, such that from the external, you can't get to that port directly, right? Like you can only get to, some manufacturer port that then is rerouting, blah, 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 right? But to minimize the headaches in the actual tool I'm using, whether that's Apache or whatever, I just want to run that as port 80, right? And in order to do that, you need to run it as a privileged operation to be able to get to port 80. So that's a bad practice on my part a lot of the time. I should probably be running those as unprivileged ports. So I should be running, I don't know, Apache at 8080. But if you're doing something quick and dirty and I'm routing that way, that's why I often do it that way. OpenShift is interesting like this because it basically, it kind of does what I'm describing, right? Where OpenShift is actually running it. Or even if you look at a standard, if you do like podman run -p or -p, I don't know what I'm going to get for this, but I get something. So this guy is now, let's see if I can break out of it. And let me just open. That didn't help me at all. Let's see. Yeah, of course. Wait, how much? What machine am I on?
Where have I landed? Am I even in my own network?
I have no idea. Oh, I'm on the rhel-8 machine. Oh, that's weird.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought I opened a new tab, but I am in an existing one. That's why. Okay, so let me just look here. Yeah, okay. So this, as you've seen me before, I can never remember the name of, or the command to get the IPs out of Versh. So I cheat every time and type in my password. All right, so I know this rhel-7 guy is the one I want. So let's do SSH. I shouldn't need to do that, but whatever. Okay, so now if we look at HTTPD, right, it actually manufactures a port, right? And it points it at port 80 as far as the container is concerned. So inside the container, my Apache
Everything
is running on
appears
port
the same.
80,
Right.
and
Everything appears
OpenShift does the
normal.
same thing.
Right.
And this is, in some ways, this is the right answer. One thing I will point out about Podman that I am not in love with and have filed a bug about is that this number is essentially randomly generated. And if you're used to Docker, it's a counter. So when I was doing a lot of debugging, for example, and I wanted to restart a container over and over and over again, I could guess what the new port would be. But you can't do that with Podman. It will be a random number. Again, from a security perspective, that might be better. But from a debugging perspective, it's not as much fun. So yeah.
Nice.
So we kill out of that. Okay, so let's see. What else do I want to talk about related to this? In the show notes, I have a couple references. In particular, this article about the run label. Basically, this guy, who is a big contributor to Podman and all things container inside Red Hat, anything he ever writes, go read it. It'll be like smarter than certainly I am.
Okay.
Maybe we try to get him on the show.
Yeah,
But
that'd
he
be a
talks,
great idea.
like, this is a very short article, as you can see, and he talks about the run label and how it kind of works and what you want to use it for, and it's handy.
Can you drop that link into something that I can drop into chat, or you could just drop
actually, I
in
can
chat too, I
drop
guess.
it. Here you go.
Yeah.
Bink. That's what I kind of meant to do and got distracted.
There you go.
So
thank you.
Yeah, I actually have it open this time. I'm doing pretty well. All right, so there's that guy, and then there is also, again, like I said, I'll put these in the show notes, but like here's a blog post about the rhel-tools guy itself, and how you might want to use it. And then actually, speaking of running containers as root and rootless, here you go. Because I was looking at this earlier. So what else did I want to mention? So that was about all I wanted to talk about with kind of the setup on rhel-tools.
Okay. That is his Twitter handle, Narendev.
It's a 1 instead of a L. Because
one.
A nice Canadian doctor has Langdon, but he actually uses Twitter. So I don't want to try to, take it over or anything.
Well, that's like there's so many Chris Shorts, and we're all in tech, or we're all tech savvy. When I went to go buy chrisshort.net in 2003, somebody had scooped chrisshort.com in 2002. And they were a photographer and digital artist. So I was like, no, that's fine. I do work on infrastructure and networks and, all kinds of fun stuff. So that works.
Well, I've actually, what's funny for me is that I've actually been on Twitter a very, very long time, but I wasn't a big user of it early on. And what I used to do, because I was in consulting, I would basically go after the brand name of my full name. So Langdon White. On everything. And so I had Langdon White on Twitter, which is a stupid Twitter handle, right? It's just way too long.
Yeah.
But because I wasn't a big user of Twitter, I didn't really get that at first. So by the time I kind of started being a big Twitter user, I kind of went back and was like, oh, I'm an idiot. So we'll so there's the background for that story. All right, let's see. So rhel-tools. So let's now that we theoretically know how to actually get into rhel-tools again, we can go into rhel-tools, and then of course, let me show you what is not here, right? So no netstat, and then inside rhel-tools. So this container takes a slightly different approach than we've been taking, right? Which is that what we've been doing is what I commonly refer to as an executable container. So one where we can just say podman run and then essentially feed it flags, right? Or arguments or whatever. And it will run whatever the thing is. This one takes the approach more so of you go into the container and it has enough privilege to do the operations on the local machine. So it's kind of one of those things where it's a little bit use case and a little bit preference, which one is better. But if you really are doing like a serious debugging session of trying to figure out why something is totally busted, it's kind of like the difference. I don't know how many people, I know in the rel admin world, right? Sudo is kind of a new thing that really was much more in the Debian side of the house.
Right.
But for me, I've always been a sudo user, and so there's sometimes I use sudo because I want to do a couple of things, right? And sometimes I actually su into the root account because I want to do a whole series of things. So it's kind of like that difference. So it kind of depends on the use case and what you're trying to accomplish, which one you want to use.
Right.
So, but we can also take a look at the Docker file itself, which of course I lost that window. Why is there no bottom scroll bar? That's weird. So yeah, so if you notice, this is command user bin bash. So as a result, we're always going to drop into that. Another way you can develop this same tool, or you can even do this by creating a new Docker file on top of this one, right? Because you can say in a Docker file, you can say from rhel-tools.
From rhel-tools, you can add on, yeah.
Exactly. You can override this, make an entry point here that would somehow get you the set of commands you wanted, right? That might get a little tricky trying to figure out how to make the different, like basically make them all available, but maybe we'll play with that when we get to. So we're going to go through a few of these containers that exist and then go and try to develop our own and figure out maybe how do we choose the best of both worlds or all worlds, right, that we want. But kind of going back to the Docker file, one of the nice things about the Docker file and being able to see the Docker file, right? This is beauty of open source, right? Is this kind of tells us all the stuff that's inside here. So these are all the different tools we have available. And again, if there is a tool that we don't have that we would like to have, we can also either, because this is a persistent container or semi-persistent container, we can, I don't know if Wireshark is actually out there. Is that, do we actually have that?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
There are no enabled repos, it says.
Oh, okay. Well, you kind of have to do that.
So this is the difference. This is one of those differences between rel 7 and rel 8 as far as the repo enabling is. Subscription Manager is not passing through in this case. So I think you have to, I don't know if you have to resubscribe, but you do have to enable certain repos. So we can still do list. Yeah. So so I don't know if it's there. But if we wanted something else, we got to track it down and install it, whatever it is. Let's see. So are there particular things we might want to talk about here? We could go into screen and really confuse ourselves. But like one of the nice things I think is that it does have Git installed. And like I said before, netstat and TCP dump and kind of all the things you might want to use for your debugging session.
Yeah. So could you, I'm trying to think, right? Like, could you somehow from your IDE with a connector to another host run a pod as a privileged user with this container, right? Like what I'm thinking is, right, like I'm at my desk, something goes bump in the night, I need to go check on a system, right? And I don't want, like my key is already set up, right? Like I can SSH wherever I need to on the network and everything, right? But I don't necessarily want to leave the friendly confines of my IDE, right? Like, because I'm used to working in that environment potentially.
Yep.
There's a way to do remote connections, and then there's a way to do, remote containers over those connections. So I'm trying to think like that would be like a fun thing to discuss at some point in the future, maybe, right? Like how do you stay off the command line, right? Like
yeah. So yes, in theory.
In theory it's possible, but we need to work on, like, that's a good show idea that I just came up with, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that is good.
Yeah.
One of the old school ways of doing that, which I don't know. I doubt this one is set up this way, but is people would actually install SSH in the container.
Right.
Oh,
Which is
so
a
this isn't going to tell me
terrible
because,
idea.
well, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, if somebody can SSH to your host, so yeah, so that would be that was one way people used to do it. We are past, like, we have so much privilege in this container that if I do a ps minus af, I'm actually seeing PIDs from
Through
the
your host,
host,
yeah.
right? So I'm not actually running SSH inside this container. But I wonder if you could SSH directly into it, right? What happens? I don't know what if I happens because I'm sharing the host. So, but I don't think any ports are exposed. So,
No.
right. So there's
So
no port that would be listening, but you could do it that way.
you could open it up.
Right.
But it
But
don't
yeah,
it is a really bad practice to run SSH inside of a container. Please don't do that.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
use the attach or the execs or whatever you need to do the proper way to get into the container.
And there's lots of tools now, like you said, like IDE plugins or whatever, that will remote attach to a container. So when you say an IDE, what would you say is the?
I mean, like, I use VS Code, right? Like, that's what I'm in most of the time when I'm like editing anything text or code related, right? Like,
one of the things that I like VS Code a lot too. But so one of the things the Eclipse team, not the Eclipse team really, but the GCC team developed years ago, was a way in Eclipse that you could generate containers to do compilation on multi-arch. So yeah,
so there's a lot of work in this space in certain areas, apparently.
Yeah,
okay.
So that was super interesting. Yeah, and I don't think it, obviously
who knows if
compiling
it's
is expensive, but it was really interesting. And so because there are a fair number of C and C++ developers who use Eclipse or use IDEs at all, which is a little bit of a shock, I think, to most people. Having this kind of built-in tool that you could just send off your compilation into a container was a really neat little feature. I don't know if it's still around. But I do remember them developing it and talking about it at a couple of different conferences. So yeah, super neat. So I really thought talking about run labels and stuff like that was going to take a lot longer. I'm trying to think what else we want to show about what's in this container.
So what I mean, so you got the package list there. That's cool. So let's see. Can we break something inside your, like you said, this is a throwaway host, right?
Yeah, totally.
So you're privileged. You can so you can check your mail. Interesting. You can do nmap and ncat. So so like set up like a quick ncat to like output a file or something, right? Maybe, I don't know. Or just nmap something from the container.
Do I actually have nmap? Oops.
It says nmap ncat installed, so
I know, but I don't know what is.
It doesn't.
What is nmap ncat?
Well, you have nc.
Oh, right. Okay.
So just do nc, and you'll see it.
There we go.
Yeah.
So
like, if you've never heard of netcat before, it's literally a way to cat a file over a network. And I've actually used NC a lot to do point-to-point, like, bandwidth testing inside internal networks. So you can actually build with DD, you can build large files and then use them to like frequently test bandwidth across the network using cron jobs and report that, and you can then graph that data as a CSV or whatever and, present it, in any kind of format you want. Right. So with a lot of tools like this container, you could do some pretty interesting things. Is DD in this container? No, it's not. So that's interesting.
No, it is, I think.
It is?
Yeah.
It is. Okay,
that might
cool.
be.
Where's that from?
That might be in base. Honestly.
Okay, that would make sense. Okay.
Like that might just be there because I mean DD is more than just a debugging tool,
True. Yeah. Like I would use this. So when the Ethernet over power line stuff. Like I set this up in my house one time, my first house, and I was like, I wonder if this is a viable thing. And like, if it wasn't, I was just going to return it to Amazon, right? So like, I set up DD with like these massive files. Like here's a 10 meg file, 100 meg file, a gigabit file, and like push these across the network multiple times, record how long it takes to do it each time with Netcat, and it was just bouncing between two Raspberry Pis across the power line Ethernet thing. And instead of using, you could do this on your own internal network with these tools, right? Like you could build that file and see what kind of throughput you're getting across your network
Right.
with just a couple containers. This is pretty cool, right? Like to me.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was not very efficient for that house because of a circuit breaker like issue, but whatever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I threw that out and just went with Wi-Fi mesh.
Well,
so,
I think the other basic stuff too, like actually, you know what we could do, which might make this slightly more interesting, right? Is that if we do Podman run,
drop your code, dude. Where am I dropping that? I drop it in Discord, right?
Oh yeah, we could do that. Wait, let's do that in 1 second. Let's just say like,
okay.
Is it UBI 7? Is that what it's called? Like that, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you could do like latest or whatever, but yeah.
But like, I won't put privilege on this, which is fine. But I mean, I think a bunch of the stupid stuff, like the fact that this, I don't think works. Oh, they did put ping in there. Finally.
Okay, good. I was about to say, if you have Netcat but not ping, that's pretty gross.
And PS is in UBI. But like if we are using, oh, good gracious. Oh, wait a minute. Did that not actually work? Why? I wasn't in the container. That's why all that stuff worked.
Oh, yeah. I need to do a bang Discord command for everybody. Duh. But yes, let me grab the invite link to Discord.
Sorry. RMIT. All right. Now, I bet PS is not going to work. No, PS does. How about ping? There we go. Okay, so ping doesn't work. I think IP is missing. Yeah, IP is missing. So a bunch of the basics are missing, which are in our tools container, right? So you get IP, you get ping, the number of times I've tried to connect a container, and wow, that's interesting.
Well, operation not. Wait, you just did this from a container.
No, I wasn't. I thought I was in a container. Why?
Operation not permitted because it uses promiscuous mode. So try to do it without promiscuous mode. So some flag you got to pass to ping.
I'm sure.
I forget which one it is. Yeah, no, I've had to do this before though. No, it's not a very big help file, so it's like a man thing, I think.
Yeah. Actually, we probably have man, which is nice. Now.
Oh no, you don't. Damn.
Yeah, man. Ping.
Yucks.
Promise. Nope. Let's see if it's casing. Nope. Oops. Well, whatever. The point is, ping, that one's a little weird. I think it's because we are so privileged that maybe we're blocking it, and so that's why it's actually having trouble. But the point being is just that even the basic stuff is not in a typical container, and this is UBI 7, right? Like you're probably in most of your scenarios going to be running something like UBI minimal, right? Basically the smallest thing you can get to kind of minimize that attack surface. Like this one doesn't even have yum installed, for example.
That's good. I mean,
if you're unfamiliar with this, there's this thing called micro DNF, and if you're in any of the minimal containers, that's how you install RPMs. And it's a little, I think it's a C program, but so this one has even less stuff, right? I bet PS is not here, for example. So that's kind of the idea. And like I said, what I wanted to introduce today was more the idea that it's handy to have tool containers basically when you're in these environments, not only because if you're trying to troubleshoot the inside of a container, but also when you're even if you have a more traditional data center setup, whether it's bare metal or virtual machines, having this handy container, which has all these tools already in it that you can just download as a binary blob from somewhere else on your network is super useful, right?
Yes.
So you want to talk about points real quick? Look at that.
Yeah. Let's talk about some points. I am actually setting up a bot command real quick. I'm just going to set that as a global cooldown and be done. All right, Narendev, you now have a Discord command that you could run, I think.
And what is the Discord command going to do?
Invite. It gives people the invite link.
Oh, to the Discord. I got you.
Yeah.
I was in a loopback problem there. So we need more people to submit for internet points. Narendev, I was a little surprised that you did not submit for more internet points. You gotta
cut them some slack. It's busy time, it's
but it's internet points. I mean, like,
it is free internet points, right?
Right. So so if you want the points from today's show, you can just go to the form itself and enter this code, or you can use this handy link, which will essentially pre-populate the code.
There you go.
And that's all there is to it.
But I just threw up that in chat, so have at it.
Our major point getters are.
He forgot what email he put in. Narendev says he forgot what email he put in.
so you can private ask me on Discord, and I can look it up. Super easy. Okay. That's one answer. The other answer is that if you use the same public name, I'll just go fix your email. It's not like we have thousands of submissions at this point.
No. This is what, our third week, something like that. I forget. Third week. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I keep using the S1E3, whatever, to remember which one it is. So we have I don't know how to say these though. DNL Housed, maybe.
Yeah. That works.
And then Sausage Crumbs and Paris for Red Hat. I like Paris. It's a very big city, but it only has one R, so I assume it's not the same Paris. So here are cool internet points. If you want last week's points or the prior week's points, all you got to do is scan through the video, watch the old video, and
you can get all of those. Like for now, they're on Twitch. They roll off in 60 days. So basically for the next 2 months, you'll have, 2 months minus 3 weeks or whatever. You'll have those videos on Twitch, but they'll always be on YouTube. And Langdon, we probably should get you your own YouTube playlist thingy. Maybe.
I've actually been putting video highlights up too. So yeah, we should.
Oh, you have? Okay. So we should definitely work on that together.
Unfortunately, the video highlights do not include the code from the episode. So
they shouldn't, right? Like you shouldn't make it free.
Right.
Points, right? Like you
have to watch our talking heads in order.
Yeah, you got to learn something to get the internet points.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or at least have a good feeling about your day for getting the internet points. Right.
So Narendev, yes, you still have 200, but I wanted to feature 3 new names, and considering everyone has 200.
Okay.
That's why I did not list your name. I apologize. Well, I don't really, but that's why you're not listed. Get more points, and then you will definitely be listed.
Move up the list. Ooh.
Exactly.
Yeah, I had 200. Where are they? Yeah. So have just touch base in Discord with us, and
yeah,
or with Langdon. I don't have access to it. I don't think. Well, yeah, I do, don't I?
I probably gave you privs, whether you know where it is or not. That's all I can say.
I would have to go looking for it, but I could probably find it.
Nice. So that's, I don't know. Why don't we? I kind of feel like we should wrap it here, unless anyone else.
Yeah, I'm good with that,
questions.
Man. No, I don't. There's no more questions. I mean, if you still have questions, right? Like there is the Discord for that reason.
Exactly.
I will drop the short code right now. There you go. And
there is a level discussion. Up channel.
There is a specific level up channel. Feel free. There's no such thing as like a noob or wrong kind of question to ask, right? Like, come in there, ask your questions, no judgment. Like, we very much think, oh, this is a great opportunity to teach you something, not, oh, how do you not know this, right? Like, we want you to learn this stuff. We want to
Yeah.
help you learn this stuff. So please feel free to jump in and ask your questions.
Well, and part of it's like, I mean, I've been using containers for, I don't know what, like 7 years now, 6, 7 years, something like that.
Yeah,
I've had
2016,
servers
I
in
think.
EC2 since 2006.
Dang.
I don't remember what stuff people don't know, right? Like
Right.
there's a whole
Yeah.
bunch of stuff that I know that I think is obvious because, I learned it somewhere. And I'm happy to talk about it and say, oh, well, that's because blah,
Right.
but
Like,
like this run label thing, right? I mean, Chris, I don't think
I didn't know
you
about the run label thing.
and I think
And
that's
I've
one
been
of the
working
coolest
with,
things.
I've been working with containers since 2016. And that's
Yeah.
new to me. So, like, I'm learning stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm happy
So
with the
definitely
show. Like, let's
we
keep
need
it rolling.
ideas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're gonna start, so we're gonna play around with some more of this tool container stuff for another couple episodes. Then we're gonna start looking at, okay, how do we start deploying those things in ways that's consumable for across the environment, or across your data center and things like that. And then if I can work it right, I can try and get Brent. Maybe we can get Brent soon on the show. So
Do
keep
you
an
want
eye
me
on
to
the
butter him
calendar.
up or something? My silky smooth voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would jump at the chance. We just need to
Yeah.
make sure the timing works.
Right.
But yeah, so watch the calendar, because as I can twist people's arm into being interviewed, we'll get them on the show, but we'll just kind of slot them in and bump whatever is there out,
Yeah. Totally.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Cool. Thank you. Join us next week for the Level Up Hour. Same bat time, same bat channel. Later today at noon, though, we have OpenShift Commons briefing. Today is, I just typed it in, Edge Computing and Industrial Manufacturing with Wolfram Richter, which is kind of a continuation from yesterday's OpenShift Commons briefing. So yeah, it'll be super interesting to continue that AI/ML story and edge computing, etc., in industrial manufacturing. Like, super enlightening yesterday to figure out, some of the things that you have to figure out to do that. So yeah, please join us at noon Eastern, 1600 UTC for that. And without any further ado, y'all have a wonderful day and see you soon.
Enjoy your twitching.